You've heard about the DISC assessment. This one is a personality test, and it gives you so much amazing information about who you are or people that you know. Companies use it, employers use it, and so many people that want to learn a little bit more about themselves use it. So today, our guest expert is going to tell us all about it, and it's going to be pretty revealing and really interesting all at the same time. So stick around because we're going to come up with that right next. Hello, Virtual Nation. Thank you for joining us for yet another episode of Waist Up Wardrobe. We are in episode 98, and today we bring you an episode that is going to be so interesting and so revealing about yourself and maybe about some other people in your life. But before I get started, I want to say thank you to my super awesome producer who makes this whole show go round. He's always in the production room. There he is, sticking out his virtual head and saying hello. And he makes everything go smoothly on this production. So thank you, Rick Moscoso, for making the whole show happen. And thank you to our audience who keeps joining us here at 11:30 every Thursday live most of the time, with some very few exceptions, and also brings and tells other people about it. Now, we are on iTunes, so you can rate us, review us, and catch us on iTunes audibly, or you can watch us on Facebook, but also on YouTube. So make sure that if you can't tune in live, you can always listen to a replay on Facebook at the Waist Up Wardrobe page, or catch us on iTunes, or catch us on YouTube. So with that said, I want to introduce our very special guest who has been a guest on the show before, but he has so much knowledge, so much experience being a mentor, a transformational coach, and I just couldn't wait to have him back again to talk about today's topic and how the DISC assessment can really give you insight into you as a person if you took it yourself, or when you are, acquiring a team member or trying to, figure out your relationships, whether it's with a peer or a colleague or a boss or even personal relationships. And so Devon Doherty is our expert here today. And let me just brag about him a little bit. He is a born salesman. He's raised a techpreneur. He is a trained consultant. He's married to a fourth generation real estate family. And Devon joined Keller Williams in 2009 and built a successful team in Orange County. He also combines his transformational coaching strategy with his down-to-earth practical aspects of how he shows up and delivers values in rooms. He has been a speaker, but I'm going to get him on here for him to tell us a little bit more about the depth and breadth of his background. So welcome, Devon. Thank you for being here once again and for honoring us with your presence. How are you today?
I am blessed. It's great to see you.
Great to see you. And we are too with your presence. So tell us a little bit more of your background that, kind of brought you to really understanding the DISC, assessment and more than that.
Well, sure. I think the first thing that I would say that brought me to DISC was just the idea that I wanted to improve my own path, right? The biggest thing that happens with us as we start to look at tools, especially tools like a behavioral assessment, is to figure out where we are and where do we want to be. And so at a very young age, I ran across DISC, started using it in my career in my 20s, and it's been a tool that I've had alongside me for all of my recruiting and all of my goals as it relates to building our businesses and our lives around us. I use it in pretty much everything we do.
Yeah. I mean, when I was talking to you pre-show, you were talking about even in your personal relationships, it could be very valuable in personal relationships as well as business relationships. Is that true?
Yeah, for sure. What's funny is that as you start to learn, learn personality, you learn how to interact with people effectively or less effectively, and it falls into all the categories that you can imagine, like the 5 love languages. If you're looking at it from that perspective, or you look at it from a business perspective, and there's so many ways that you can look at personality assessments, especially DISC, and you can use them for navigating what's effective communication or less effective communication for whomever you're communicating with. Because obviously communication is the goal of getting your message across. But when you don't know who you're speaking with, it can be very challenging.
Right. And you're kind of like operating blindly, which most people tend to do unless they kind of have insight or awareness into this. Right. And so the DISC is one way to gain that awareness and insight. So just for like in plain layman's language, for, anybody out there that might not really know what this is, can you just tell us what the DISC assessment is?
Yeah, I'd love to. And before, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like just to insert one little piece, and that is that any personality assessment, including DISC, comes from keywords that we use. And the keywords we use are built into our unconscious minds. And what comes out is that our programming comes out in words. And our words are basically our thoughts. And then our thoughts create our feelings, and our feelings create our actions, and then that creates our results. So the point is that when you talk about what is DISC, DISC is a way of assessing a human's behavior profile that they've created for themselves. So that's really what it comes down to. And there's 4 main categories. That's why it's called DISC. So
is it considered a personality test more, or a behavioral test, or what does it have a category like that?
That's a great question. There's a lot of debate in the psychology world about behavioral assessments versus personality tests. And I guess I would just tell you that my differentiation between the two is that a behavioral assessment is a tool that allows you to assess a person's behavior, both natural and adapted. Natural behavior is what they do when no one else is looking. Adapted is what they do when they're under the stress of a work environment or whatever environment you're assessing them for. So that is what I would call behavioral assessment. Personality tests, there's a bunch of people that call themselves personality tests. I believe a lot of personality tests are really effectively behavioral assessments, but they call them a different word. So I don't know that there's a significant difference between the two, but in the grand scheme of things, I like to consider it a behavioral assessment for the main reason that is that if a person has a less effective behavior they want to eliminate, we have tools to help them take it away. And that means that you can change your behavior.
Well, that's interesting, because as I was asking the question, I had this thought, when I think about personality test versus a behavioral test, I think about personality as something that we are is ingrained in us. We're born with, like, people have personalities, but a behavior is something you can change. Does that sound right? I mean, that was just
it's you're onto something really important here, because you're right. People have a belief, most people, and again, I don't want to generalize too much here, but in general, what you can say is that a personality seems to be attached to who we are at our core, right? Where a behavior might be a layer away from that. The way I would like to say it is that beliefs and values are very closely linked, but beliefs and values can both be edited to make them more effective for where you want to go. Personality has a tendency to have the word that seems like it's inside and it's not changeable. We talk about any of these assessments and you have the pros and cons of an assessment, right? One of the cons of a personality assessment or even a behavioral assessment is that the negative feedback that a person can perceive could be attached to who they can't change. And I live in a world where that doesn't even exist. Every single behavior can be changed if a person is willing to. So that's, I think, a really important point. Is the reason why I stand on the behavior side of the conversation, not the personality side, is because I think people can buy into the fact that they can make a more effective strategy if they want to.
Excellent. That makes a lot of sense. And so when it comes down to the DISC assessment specifically, who uses it? Who is a tool really designed for?
Well, it's designed for anyone who wants to see the patterns that are existing in a person in the way that companies are using DISC tool, as many other tools as well, but DISC is a primary one. And they're using that tool to figure out whether the candidate fits the behavioral requirement of that particular job. For instance, salespeople, and again, I don't want to go too deep in all the, well, we can break it down, but in general, salespeople are usually D or I personality, D being dominant, I being influencer. So D and I are the two big differences. And then S and C are usually administrative functions. So at an HR level, you can easily cull through a bunch of resumes to figure out which type of people are going to be better suited by their current behavior on their internal path, whatever's going on in their head.
Yeah. So you're talking here, in terms of, companies hiring a potential employee and them using the assessment as a way to just figure out the strengths and and where to best fit a certain employee, or if they fit a certain job description. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's one use of the tool. It's very, very much used in the hiring funnel. Very effective tool for the hiring funnel. Another way that the tool gets used is in coaching. What happens when a coaching relationship gets created, the more a person knows about the other person, the easier it is for them to coach to that modality. The way we use it in real estate is that when we understand how a client's behavior primarily shows up, we can speak to them in that behavior language, if you will. Yeah. And every single person's walking around with a primary and a backup style, and we are able to identify what those are, and we can speak to those in a way that's going to cause them to listen to us better and for us to get our message across better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that these tools are so fascinating, right? Because it does give us a little bit insight into how people act or react, or their style. And it does allow us, as, whether we're a potential employer or you're in a relationship, any kind of a relationship with somebody, to really be able to almost like talk to their style, if you wanted to really be able to, to get somewhere in a conversation, to communicate in a better way. So there are these 4 categories, right? The DISC, and I would love to break that down for the audience, just to talk about each category specifically. I know you have a great slideshow that really explains that with visuals, and I'd love to have you break that down for us, if you will.
Sure. Before we go to the slides, let me just prepare the audience for an image in their mind so they can get an understanding. The best way to look at this is to look at the things that you already see in your life around you. So let's just all pretend that we're at a stoplight and we want to cross the crosswalk. And I'm going to just break down the 4 styles from a crosswalk perspective really quickly so you get an understanding. The D, which, that's my category, by the way. The D is the guy that's pressing the button repeatedly, waiting for the crosswalk. And then, by the way, he looks kind of very briefly and just starts walking, doesn't even pay attention to whether the sign changed or not. That's the D personality. The I personality is they're at the crosswalk, and they've said hello to everyone around them, and they are literally almost exchanging numbers before the light changes. Then the light changes and they still don't go because they're in that conversation, right? And then the S personality S stands for steadiness. They're there, and they're definitely not going to move before the light goes. They're going to move with the group, and they want to make sure everybody's safe getting across. That's the S personality. And then the C is the cautious personality. And they're the ones that are going to wait probably 5-6 seconds before the light changes. They wait. They see the countdown, 20 seconds, 19. Then they start going. But they still internally, they're measuring in their minds, my steps width is 3 feet and it's a 60-foot crosswalk. And they start to do the analysis, and then they may even hold back. That's the C personality. So you have these 4 different types of basic personalities, and yes, I can dive deeper into the slides, and I'll make that transition right now. So let me just share go ahead. Do you have any thoughts on that story?
Yeah, just another foundational. So the D stands for dominant.
Mm-hmm.
The I stands for
influencer.
And then the C is
the C is compliance or cautiousness.
And the S is steady, the steady person.
Steady or supportive. Yeah.
Supportive. Got it. Okay. Yes. Let's dig deeper. This is going to be.
Sounds good. So I'm gonna switch over to the slides right now, and then I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. So there are really a bunch of things to explore on this slide real quickly. Number one is, you can see at the top it says tell versus listen. A person that is a D or an I is what we would call tell assertive. They're going to be making statements or commands, where an S or a C will be making what's called ask assertive. They'll be asking questions. So when you hear an S or a C ask a question, that's their form of assertiveness. So they're more listening based, if that makes sense. Yeah. And then on the left and the right, you see that the D and the C are more task driven. They like checklists. They get stuff done. And the P on the right side, you have the I and the S. They're more people oriented. They're the ones that are going to be much more, connected to people. So that kind of gives you an understanding. Now I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. So I'm for the audience, just we can probably come back to any questions you have, but I'm just going to run through this really quickly so you can get a feel for it. The D is basically stands for a driver type of personality, a dominant personality, a problem solver, a risk taker. And they're generally they're a small group of people, by the way. They're less than 5% of the total population is D. Their bottom line, they place time on value. They can be very much attitudinal, argumentative. They can overstep their boundary very quickly. They don't like routine. There's a lot of things going on for the D can be really great. Their biggest fear is being taken advantage of. That's the secret fear of a D personality. Now remember, we have a primary and a secondary. So some of the Ds that are listening may say, "Oh, that's not me." Well, it could depend on your secondary personality. They have an innovative focus on the future. They have they base everything on results. When they're analyzing information, they offer innovative and progressive systems and ideas, but they don't really weigh out pros and cons. They just kind of go for it. As they're typically leaders, problem solvers, and multitaskers. They see the big picture, can handle a lot of things at once. Where they have a hard time is becoming an active listener. One of the biggest coaching things that I have with my D personalities is taking them long enough to slow down to listen. And they have a hard time relaxing. It's just go. And when you look at what a D wants, they want authority, they want prestige. These words are super valuable for them. And then interacting with the D, what you definitely want to do is you want to be direct and brief and to the point. You want to ask what, not how questions. And you want to suggest ways to achieve results, lead and solve problems. To be a D, Ds basically only respect other Ds. So from sales and relationship perspective, what you don't want to do is you don't want to ramble on. You don't want to repeat yourself. You don't want to be too sociable, because you're just going to burn out a D, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So when it comes to relationships that click, just curious about this. Is there anything about like how opposites are better to work together, or that doesn't really even come into this equation at all?
No, it does come into this equation a ton, especially in the work environment. What you'll find about, just look at your relationship with Rick, right? Rick has more of an SC type of personality. You have more of an ID type of personality. I haven't done your assessments, but I can tell by the words and the way that everyone operates. And what you'll find is that, like for me in my real estate world, I have I'm a DI personality, and I have SCs that are my operations partners, the people that run the operations side of my business. If I had another DI running that part of the business, we'd be both on fire, right? Yeah. And it would be an absolute stuff show. And and at the same time, what you'll find is you're always going to have kind of a yin yang balance that you want to create for the types of roles that you have. Now, in an organization of a lot of salespeople, a lot of the forward salespeople are DI type personalities or ID, but then you also have some SCs that are creating the systems and the structure and the orders. And some of them are CS, some are SC, but that's kind of how admin and sales operate in a work environment. Now, in a personal environment, like for instance, my wife, I'm married 30 years this year, and my wife is a DC and I'm a DI. So we have a very high intense relationship because we're both dominant personalities. She's more cautious with the way that she's analytical. That's why she's kind of our in-house CFO, if you will. And I'm a DI, so I'm the one that's out there connecting and getting business and doing all that stuff. So it does show up, and it shows up in key relationships as well.
Interesting. Okay, so the I in the disc, your slideshow is fascinating. It's such a great tool to explain this process.
Yeah, and I know we're gonna go a little bit faster, so I'm gonna share my screen here again, and let's go share and then pop this up. So the I is enthusiastic, trusting, optimistic, persuasive, talkative. You can see an I. They're always the life of the party. They're the people that they're the ones that are planning the party. They're the ones that are gathering at the party. They're the last ones at the party. Anything related to party, that's what an I is all about. And I'm just gonna, like I said, scroll through these slides. I'm not going to read everything on the slide, but you get an idea. And they're motivated by flattery, praise, and popularity. You got to understand the great thing about I's is that all awards were generated for I's. If you've ever watched the Academy Awards, the ones that light up the most are the I personalities. The D's just kind of get on and get off stage, but the I's are just all about their conversation. They're the ones that just absolutely love that. And then their greatest fear is rejection. So they don't want to be rejected. So they want to constantly be included. And that's a big opportunity for I's. They also want to be very autonomous. They are open to coaching, but they sometimes won't listen to it. They want to apply it. I's generally kind of wing it, if you will. In the data world, they lose concentration very easily. They can be creative in problem solving. They're in a team dynamic. They are very good communicators, very articulate, very persuasive. They also generally have a good sense of humor. Their biggest areas for personal growth with I's is that they need to be less impulsive, and that they need to weigh their pros and cons before making a decision. They need to be more focused on results. It's a really, really big opportunity for I's is that they generally do everything by feel, when in results they kind of forget. And they need to talk less and listen more. So what an I typically wants is they want this recognition. They want this freedom from control. They want people to talk to. They want a positive work environment. What they do want for sure is they want to help develop talk into action. They want to allow time for stimulating social conversations. They want to develop a participative relationship. What you don't want to do with an I is you don't want to eliminate the social time or do all the talking or ignore their ideas or tell an I what to do. Those are really the breakdown of the I.
They're people.
They're people. Yep. They're absolutely people. And what you'll find, the thing I love about I's is that they really brighten up the room. The thing that's interesting is if you're looking to create a winning environment, like a winning boardroom, let's say you're making a big presentation and you show up, you've seen this before, even in the movies, you get a bunch of D personality attorneys in the room, one I can change the whole dynamic. And it reminds me of the movie Legally Blonde, because you have a gal who is more bubbly and open, and that changes the whole dynamic. So it's a really, really important piece to add to any puzzle.
Excellent. So then the next one is the S.
Yes. So we'll jump back in and share again. And the S personality. S stands for steady and supportive, and S is a good listener. I'm slowing my pace down because S's speak at a much slower pace, and they are much better at taking time for people. They cooperate really well, and their pace and their way that they operate is just so systematic and steady. They're very loyal. They're compliant. They're good listeners.
Are you sharing screen, Devon?
What's that?
You don't see your screen if you're meaning to.
I was attempting to.
Oh, okay.
All right, so we're going to start over with the S's.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's go click here, and then I'll roll back up. All right, so S personality. S is steady, supportive, good listeners. Their keywords are stable. They have a mantra of just really wanting to help understand how what other people are saying. They have a mindset of I will do it. They are very friendly. They are like that dog, right? They're very loyal. They're good listeners. Their weaknesses are that they hold a grudge. This is a very, very big challenge for S's. They're not quick to forgiveness. So one of the big things there is to make sure you're constantly in good communication with your S people in your world. They have difficulty establishing priorities sometimes. They need to be, kind of coached through that. They're motivated by their loyalty and their security and their safety. And their biggest fear is losing security. So they're generally salaried employees in the work environment. S's are generally not on any kind of big bonus programs. They don't want to take that risk. So S's want a team atmosphere. They don't want conflict. And they generally are on the administrative side of the organization. From a data perspective, while analyzing information, an S may be outwardly agreeable but inwardly unyielding, meaning that it's hard to know when you've persuaded an S over to your way of thinking. They take their concerns internal, which causes them to, build up that grudge that I talked about, and then they can be slow to action. So what they generally are very good for in a team environment is that relationship building, team playing. They can also be a really good voice of reason. They adapt really, really well because they're super pliable, super flexible, and they just need to be more direct in their interactions. One of the things that's really important about an S is that they love to have the repeated work patterns. They like consistency. They need time to adjust to change. A couple more things here is that they need clarification. They constantly are looking for clarity. One of the mantras of an S is clarity is a process. So then they're going to constantly be looking to get clearer and clearer on their goals. And with an S, you don't want to be too pushy or overly aggressive or too confrontational.
Interesting. That is definitely, it's so interesting, the differences between the categories, but also as we go through these categories, I see that, I feel like, I have traits from D and I and S. So what is your thoughts on people aren't necessarily just a straight D or a straight I, are they?
No, as a matter of fact, many of the scales of the DISC, there's a lot of ways to take the DISC assessment, and a lot of the scales use a 0 to 100 scale, right? And so a person will see that they're a high score on one of them. Well, they're generally a higher score on a second one as well. So we have a primary and a backup behavior. And it does you do want to take a moment to talk about what's called adapted personality or adapted behavior versus natural. The thing that happens is that natural behavior is what drives us internally. Adapted is what we do under stress of whatever that environment is. It could be stress of sport, stress of work, stress of life, whatever situation you're in. The stress behavior profile set is generally where you are putting on a mask. You're masking your natural behavior because you think you need to show up in a certain way for that environment. And that could be stress in a student role, right? It could be in school where a student shows up and they act differently in the classroom than they do at home. Well, that's because of the stress that's created. And then they put that mask on, and then they see their D go up, or they see their S go up, or they see their C go up. Those are all the things. So when you're taking an assessment, you're looking for your natural behavior. And that's what you really want to look at people through, is the natural lens, because the adapted lens is when you're putting them under that stress.
Yeah, very interesting. And so the final category is the C.
Correct. Yep. Let me jump right in on that. Share screen and share. share the whole screen. There we go. So C's, C's are really compliant and accurate. They are the accountants of the world. They're detail oriented. They're really good to have on an assembly line or anything that needs to get done in a procedural way. They're generally careful fact finders. They're kind of an anchor of reality. They're always bringing you back to what's really going on. Their weakness is that they need clear-cut boundaries, so much so that they can lock up. And what that can do is it can get them bogged down in details. And what they're motivated by is high quality, detailed tasks, opportunities to demonstrate their expertise. The challenge with C's is that their greatest fear is criticism. So when you approach a C with a new strategy or new behavior or new method, you need to make sure that they're getting credit for the things that they're doing well and sandwich that criticism with anything else that they're doing well. They really need the feedback sandwich. And C personality also really is a personality that loves to do technical work, can be great at programming, great at anything, even any task that is, kind of repetitive, they thrive in that environment. And, when analyzing information, a C may become overly cautious and conservative. They might get too bogged down in details. A lot of times you'll find C's don't act quickly, especially around D's. So you have kind of a mix you have to deal with. And then I don't know what happened there. So C's, they are great organizers. They generally like to do it themselves. They strive for logical, consistent environments. They're great at analysts, and they can be good diplomats because they will just toe the party line really, really well. What happens with C's is, from an action standpoint, is that they need to be more decisive. They need to take more risks, is really what it comes down to when you're growing a C to a leader. And then when you're looking at C types, they're looking at the value and quantity. They look for that reassurance. They need plan change and exact job descriptions. And what you want to do with a C is you want to prepare your case in advance. You want to make sure that you support the ideas and statements with accurate data. One of the statements that we use to our C personalities in real estate when they're having a hard time making a decision is we say, you have all the facts and information you need to make this decision, because they will continue to research and research and research until there's no more. And then what you don't want to do is you don't want to refuse to explain details, and you don't want to answer any questions vaguely or casually. So hopefully that gives you kind of an understanding. And then this is that's the end of it right there. And I will stop my share.
Well, so it's so interesting. So in all the years you've really been using DISC as a tool, has there been anything that has been just sort of a unicorn, somebody that just had surprised you, whether it was that they were so one personality driven, or if that doesn't even exist, I don't know, or they were like a sum of all the four parts, something that was really unusual in the years that you've really observed this? Or does it usually just fall into that same pattern of everybody's about two dominant ones, and then there, a little bit of a sprinkle of everything else?
Well, I can give you a couple of unicorn examples. Because of the work that I do with NLP and coaching, I see people's personalities / behaviors, and I really like the concept of behaviors over personalities. Is that I see their behaviors being able to optimize for what their goals are. In other words, I have had former partners in my life, current partners in my life, who want more out of the sales side of the world, but they are sitting with an SC type of personality. I've seen them reduce the fear and supportive cautiousness of an SC, and I've seen them grab onto the smaller parts of their I or their D personality and emphasize those. And that takes work. So the answer is no, there's no surprises with these assessments. There's no unicorns, but there are ways for people to grab more of what they want out of another category. For instance, if a person wants to be, you know the old saying in life, there's either security or opportunity. You can't have both, right? So security driven people are S's and C's, and they want the opportunity, but they have to reach for it. So we have to help them optimize what does it look like for them to go after those ID characteristics that cause them to take opportunity or to get into sales.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So every time, well, first of all, with the hashtag Disc and Shine, you have a PDF that you are willing to give the audience that will help them graph their own personality. There is a link, first of all, actually, I should say, there is a link that you provided, the Tony Robbins link, where people can go and take their DISC assessment, and you feel like that's a really good source there. So we'll put that up in the comments for the audience, but you're also offering this PDF of a template that they can use after they get the results. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. It was basically, it's just a repeat of what we shared in the slides, and then a little bit more details. And then as far as the Tony Robbins disc, just to clarify, the Tony Robbins disc is free. That's one of the reasons why I recommend it. There are paid discs as well, and you can see the link below. TonyRobbins.com/disc is where you can go and get the free assessment from Tony Robbins. It's not going to give you the level of detail you can get from a paid disc, and there's a lot of sources to get paid discs as well. And people can even reach out to me, and we can get them connected up to paid disc. The difference, though, what I would tell you is that this is a primer for what it looks like for a person to kind of go internal. And what I've seen is a lot of families just, take the free Tony Robbins and start using that for a communication tool around the dinner table. I've seen it happen in a work environment, a small team environment. It's a great starting point, is what I would say. And then the additional tools that we talked about is just getting a copy of the slides that we showed so that they can look at those more closely.
Well, that's wonderful. And everything you said is so good. It really concisely laid out what a disc assessment is and how people can use it in their lives. So we wrap up with the Waist Up Wardrobe Weekly Wrap Up. And if there's one takeaway, Devon, that people should take away from this, what would that one takeaway be?
The one takeaway is that you're using DISC whether you know it or not. So why don't you get on board with how to use it most effectively?
That's right. We are intentionally, whether we're unintentional or intentional about, we might as well be intentional, right?
That's right.
And then the tools that you offered with the Tony Robbins link here to go get the test taken. But people can also look up like the paid ones that tend to be a little bit more accurate. So thank you for that tool. Is there a tip that you would suggest if somebody was getting tested for, or if this disc was being used on them, is there a tip you can offer the audience of what that would be?
Yes, that's great question, by the way. And I got a couple of tips. Number one, you're the only one that can do your assessment. I've seen many times where assessment is done by committee. Well, honey, what do you think I am? Or, partner, what do you think I am? And that's a very ineffective way to do the assessment. The other thing is to do it when you're best and you're freshest in the morning. It's always best to do it after your first cup of coffee and you're all on board. We prefer that when we give the assessment that people are fresh. Because your assessment at the end of the day could look much different than your assessment at the beginning of the day.
Oh, I love that. That is so important, because as we're exploring a lot of these different assessments, people have been asking the question, should I be taking this at a certain time? Do I have to take it every couple of years? Is it just something you take every couple of years, or is it pretty much do people take it multiple times throughout their lives?
Great question. The answer is yes, you can take it multiple times throughout your life, and you will find that your disc can change over time, but generally only through traumatic events. A traumatic event can change your personality. I was in a situation when I was 19 years old, and I saw 3 of my friends die in front of me in a car accident. It changed who I was at that time. So any traumatic event can cause a personality / behavior to switch. And it doesn't necessarily mean that is the natural behavior, by the way. It could be the adaptive behavior that switches. So to change the natural behavior, you have to do deep work. And deep work is understanding what your beliefs and your values are deep enough so that you can choose whether you want them to be those or you want to upgrade them in some other way.
That is so good. And it's so funny because the expert on the Colby said the same thing. When a life-changing event occurs, it's good to take the assessment again, which is very, very interesting from a psychological standpoint. Finally, action item. I know my action item. I'm going to go take this test. Do you have another action item for the audience as we wrap up here?
Better than even taking the test is to educate a few people around you on the basics and to ask them who they think you are before you take the assessment, so that you can then have kind of a fun revealing after the assessment. So go to friends, family, spouse, anyone else and say, hey, what do you think I am? After you give them a little bit of breakdown, and then go take the assessment. And it's a lot of fun, but don't let them take the assessment with you.
Such a great conversation, so insightful, so revealing. I'm so appreciative that you were here to talk to us about it, Devon. Thank you so much. And there you have it, Waist Up Wardrobe Nation. The assessment and the DISC assessment and how it can work for you, how you can make it work for your life, how you can use it to assess your relationships. It is such a great tool. Join us next week on Thursday at 11:30, where we bring you a new fresh show. Remember, we're on iTunes, where you can download us and listen to us, but you can also stream us through Facebook and through YouTube. And so join us in any one of these platforms, the one that seems right to you and that you're comfortable with. And join us next week, where we bring you a new fresh show on Waist Up Wardrobe once again.
Okay. Start when you're ready.
All right. Oh, how do I usually start? Do I start with, I know. Okay. So if you're in business for yourself, or you're how people, strive when they are trying to do something. I'm going to try that again. So if you're in an entrepreneurial world, or you're a business person.
That was good.
Okay.
Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
All right. Let's kill the.
Yeah.
He always does this to me, where he puts these sort of bloopers on, but there have been funnier bloopers, Rick.
Yeah. You didn't give me much last week, so.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Devon, I know you're on a time clock here. I really, really appreciate you being on, and Rick, you'll be able to get that PDF, right? So we can put it up and post when we post it up.
Yeah. Can you? Oh, I can just
I'll send it to you right now.
Okay. Quick question, Dev.
Yeah.
I know you can touch this. Like if you touch, you can be like you are a DI or a DC, or a SC, or either way. But how often do you see it where it crosses the diagonal and doesn't touch
all the time?
other?
That's a great question. Yeah. You can be an IS or a DC or a DS. I mean, you can. There's any number of combinations.
Yeah, it was so fascinating. I mean, it makes me want to just go and dig deep into my personality test.
So who is the guy who is the person, not the guy necessarily, but who is the person that sits right smack dab on the cross?
Nobody.
Right? Nobody. You don't see anybody like that?
No. There's everybody has a dominant and a backup, and they're usually going to be well above what we call the line. So there's nobody. Everyone has a dominant and backup style that is more predominant. There's nobody that has all four. We all have some characteristics of all four, but from an assessment perspective, I think now DISC is the number one assessment of all assessments, and this is probably something we should have mentioned. But there's I think somewhere in the range of 500 million assessments of the DISC that has been done.
Wow!
And there's just nobody in the middle of that line. It's one dominant, one backup, and the other ones don't matter. They're just not who you are. And that's kind of how you roll.
Yeah. I mean,
Very
I don't
cool.
know. When we were talking about that, I was like, well, I am a detail-oriented person. So I'm in the C part, and I feel a little bit of the S part. I feel like I'm probably dominant, and I like people, so I'm a people person. So I was just kind of all over the place. I need to take the test.
Yeah, it's pretty quick. You can do it in about 6 minutes.
All right. Well, I'm going to go for it.
There you go.
Yeah, you should do it to your give it to your kids too. We did that for our girls, and it helped us deal with their personalities way better, because Jordan and Erica are so much different. They're, Erica's a high I and Jordan's a very high D, C type of person, and it just helped us deal with their personalities and their attitudes sometimes. way better. And they were quick to respond because we changed the way we asked things or told them things. So I don't know.
Yeah,
just
I agree.
Something you want to try.
For sure.
Thank you, Devon. I know you got to run.
You bet, guys. Thank you.
Appreciate
Great
Thanks,
to
Dev.
see you again.
Hey,
All
we
right.
need to